There is a quiet moment most men don't talk about. You are in a conversation, someone misunderstands you. Maybe they question your choice, maybe they doubt your intention, and before you think, you start explaining. You explain your tone, you explain your decision, you explain why you did what you did, you explain who you really are, and it feels reasonable. But later, something feels off. Not anger, not regret, just a subtle loss of center. Tonight we are going to talk about that moment. Stop explaining yourself. Not out of arrogance, not out of ego, but out of self respect. Most over explaining doesn't come from clarity, it comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing approval, fear of being seen incorrectly, fear of rejection. The illusion is this: if I just explain it better, they will finally understand me. But underneath that, there is attachment. Attachment to being seen in a certain way, attachment to controlling perception, attachment to validation, and that attachment quietly destabilizes your frame. When your nervous system senses social threat, disapproval, confusion, tension, it goes into subtle activation. Your body interprets it as a risk, the heart rate shifts, the breath shortens, the mind searches for repair. Explaining becomes a regulation strategy. You are not explaining to clarify, you are explaining to soothe yourself. The need to explain yourself is rarely about clarity, it's about control. You want to control how you are perceived, you want to correct the image in their mind, you want to make sure they don't walk away with the wrong version of you. But here's the tension: the more you try to control perception, the more you reveal that you are controlled by it. And once someone senses that, your frame is no longer stable. So the real question isn't, did they misunderstand me? It's, why does their misunderstanding shake me? Let's go deeper. Ego doesn't just mean arrogance. Ego is identity attachment. I am a good person. I am a competent. I am misunderstood. I am right. When someone challenges one of those identities, your ego mobilizes. Explaining becomes defense. You are not defending facts. You are defending who you believe you are. The mind starts constructing arguments. You add context. You justify your tone. You bring in past examples. And sometimes you win the argument. But you still feel unsettled. Because the core issue was never the argument. It was your dependence on agreement. There's a difference between communication and self-justification. Communication is calm. It is brief. It is grounded. Self-justification has urgency. It repeats, it circles back, it tries again. It has a slight tremor underneath it. The tremor is attachment. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that other people's opinions belong to them. You can act with integrity, but you cannot control their interpretation. The moment you try to control it, you step out of your center. And Nietzsche would say something similar in a different tone: a man becomes small when he seeks constant approval for his strength. Not because approval is evil, but because dependence weakens sovereignty. When you over-explain, you unconsciously say, my position isn't solid unless you validate it. Think about that. If your decision was internally settled, why does it need 5 paragraphs? If your boundary was clear, why does it need emotional negotiation? Sometimes silence isn't avoidance. Sometimes silence is stability. But most people can't tolerate that silence because silence exposes who is actually grounded and who is seeking reassurance. And once you see that dynamic, you'll start catching yourself mid-sentence. Let's contrast fantasy with reality. Fantasy says, if I explain perfectly, they will finally understand me, respect me, and the tension will disappear. Reality says, some people will misunderstand you no matter how well you explain. Some people will project their own fears onto you. Some people need you to be wrong so they can feel right. And here's the part that stings. Your explanation does not fix their psychology. It only drains yours. This is where emotional maturity begins. You realize that clarity is your responsibility. Agreement is not. There is power in being misunderstood. Not reckless, not careless, but stable. If someone thinks you are cold because you set a boundary and you know you acted with integrity, you don't rush to warm their perception, you let them sit with their interpretation. Because self respect means you don't abandon your center to manage someone else's comfort, and that restraint is felt, even if it's never acknowledged. Now let's rebuild identity. If you stop explaining yourself, what replaces it? Not silence as a punishment, not detachment as superiority, but internal clarity. Am I explaining to inform or am I explaining to secure approval? That one question changes everything. Masculine frame control isn't dominance, it's containment. It's the ability to feel impulse to justify and choose not to follow it. It's emotional self regulation. Your breath stays slow, your voice stays even, your sentence becomes shorter. You say what is necessary, then you stop, and you allow space. Space is uncomfortable for people who need control, but it is natural for someone who is internally settled. Over time, something shifts. You stop fearing misinterpretation. You stop chasing correction. You start acting from values instead of reactions. And ironically, people begin to respect your words more because they are not inflated with defense. They are precise, measured, clean. The strongest position in a room is not the loudest, it's the least reactive. When criticism comes, you assess it. If it's useful, you adjust. If it's projection, you release. No debate, no performance, no emotional theater. Just quiet evaluation. Because a man who knows who he is doesn't scramble to prove. He simply continues being it. And that consistency does more than explanation ever could. This does not mean you never clarify. It means you clarify once, calmly, without emotional urgency. And if the person still refuses to understand, you let the misunderstanding exist. That is maturity. That is nervous system strength. That is identity security. When you stop explaining yourself compulsively, you reclaim energy. Energy that was previously spent managing perception. Energy that now reinforces direction. You become less persuasive, but more solid. Less defensive, but more decisive. Less concerned, but more centered. And in that shift, something subtle happens. You stop living in other people's interpretations. You start living in alignment with your own. The final layer is this: you cannot build a strong identity while constantly outsourcing its confirmation. At some point, you decide my character will speak through consistency. My boundaries will speak through action. My silence will speak when explanation is unnecessary. And if someone walks away with the strong idea, you let them. Because your stability is not up for negotiation. Stop explaining yourself, not to become cold, not to become distant, but to become internally anchored. Say what needs to be said only once, then return to your center and let your life, not your defense, do the talking.